the energy that surrounds us. And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael, and thank you to everyone for tuning in and joining us on this wonderful Friday evening, October the 11th, in case anyone's forgotten or may have plans, in which case I just reminded you the date, so hopefully that helps you. Now, normally this would be a time when I would go into housekeeping, but actually we are caught up on housekeeping for the week. So I am blessed and grateful and appreciative to be able to announce on the show two wonderful guests. I present to you Christopher Jacobs and Joanna Michaels of The Lifting.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here. Joanna?
Yeah, hi. I'm so happy you invited us on and so happy to be talking to everyone tonight and hope they really enjoy it.
I'm sure they will. And thank you both for being available on this evening. And full disclosure is normally all of us are not so active at this hour. So please keep that in mind that, we are in an unusual hour. So we'll just see where the fun takes us.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this has been great. It's very seldom that we're actually on live shows, just in case we flub a little. But this is unique for us as well, because normally we don't do shows quite this late. We've done pre-recorded this late before, but it's been a long time since we've done live. So kind of bear with me a little bit if I start trailing off somewhere. I'll have to get a nod from her to get back on track. So, but the reason we're on here, folks, is we're of the lifting.net. What I do is I do sessions for people, generally almost every day of the week. They have me remove attachments. They have me do energy work on them. They have me remove demons, curses, things of that nature. And Joanna and I do a podcast called The Lifting, that we have over 200 episodes of The Lifting on our YouTube. And the link is, of course, on the site that you see right there. And yeah, I do this pretty much every day. I notice people's property have to be cleaned up pretty much on a regular basis. So a lot of creepy energies, especially this time of year, the Samhain or Samhain timeframe of the year, approaching Halloween.
Wow. Well, congratulations on 200 episodes. I just recently celebrated 100, so I'm halfway to your level.
That's great. And I am Joanna Michaels, and Chris and I met in 2015 and have been working together ever since 2016. And in 2017, January is when we started the lifting. And basically what we try to do is, again, at the energies around us, what we like to talk about is the seen and the unseen, and the energies and the dynamics between everything, and then how it affects your life and how it's been affecting our lives since the beginning, basically. And so we're really big. We love galactic history because it applies to current present moment. So we love talking about galactic history and things that are out there. Chris also is a channeler as well. So we're able to speak to many different folks out there and kind of get their perspective. The one interesting thing I will say with all these discussions is that that's really what things are, is usually conversations and a perspective given. It's really hard to, because everybody wants black and white. Everybody wants the truth, right? Everybody wants this, that, and the other. But what we see more a lot of is different perspectives about things. And so we find that quite interesting. It's wonderful to be able to create a generalized story and understanding, which I think many people don't have, to really think of a much bigger picture than what they're thinking of now. And it's been very, very interesting to do, as well as all the way down to the level of just day-to-day living and how you can co-create better for your own self, rather than for potentially have learning bad habits of co-creating for somebody else, versus really what are you interested for yourself, for your family, for society as a whole. So it's a very vast conversation that Chris and I have worked on covering, never to scare anybody. We talk about things that people would consider very much in the light. We talk about things that people sometimes become afraid of because it's more of a darker agenda. But in really, we kind of believe that concept that knowledge is power, and to understand all of these dynamics going on is really helpful for then people to learn the skills that they need to learn in order to co-create the experience that they want. And so we've just been working on that, pretty much nonstop since we started actively doing it in 2017.
That's really cool. And so I'm kind of curious a little bit, and I mean, we've kind of talked around it, but what led you both to sit down and go, we ought to do this kind of work. Let's call it the lifting. So how did all of this truly come about? Was it like an experience that happened and you're like, oh, we got to start doing this? Or what was that started it?
Well, what ended up happening is, before I met her, I had already a psychic services company called WatcherSpeak, and many people that knew me pre 2015, I had that going on. And what ended up happening when I just prior, actually before that, prior to me getting with her, I was writing a book from the fall to the lifting. And what that was a series of channelings I did at the time, different past life regressions, things of that nature. And one of the things that was said within that book, I don't have it out anymore. It's had to be redacted for other reasons. But the core premise of the lifting burned from one phrase that was in it. It was around a past life that surrounded the times of Atlantis. And there was a phrase in there that said, you brought about a great fall, now you have to bring about a great lifting. And so further on in, we decided, based on that information, based on basically it's essentially restoring the balance, we decided to rebrand WatcherSpeak as the lifting at that point. And since that point forward, every show we've done has been labeled with that, with the exception of Galactic Interstellar Council, which is our sister site. It's a brand we inherited, and we're retooling that as well for our galactic historical purposes with our partner Bjorn Ragnarsson on that side. But for the lifting, that is pretty much the origin point of the phrase for the lifting, or the title of lifting.
And then basically, again, it kind of was our determination that we felt, again, one of those old phrases, the victors write history, and understanding that the knowledge and information about who we are, what our capabilities are, again, history, the good and the bad that has come along with our history, and everything. It's kind of like taking something nice or something good and just covering it with mud and covering it with mud. So many people that are on earth today have been here. They've had multiple lives here. There are certainly those that come and have an experience and they do whatever they want to do in one and they never come back. But many people, we were realizing as well, were from around the times, a lot of people, that times of Atlantis, the Egyptian time frame, and a lot of people seem to be here because of the fall that happened, the falls, and even further back in galactic history, falls that happened there, that there were great wars, great battles, great falls that occur. And part of the goal is, so we always say we went down the toilet first when we're having an experience to understand both sides of everything. We went down the toilet first. We lost in wars. We lost in things. We weren't that kind to one another. And all of these different experiences of constantly circling the toilet, basically. And basically, we're reaching a time frame where there is a desire, as there should be, to experience what is that other side of the coin. And that other side of the coin really has a lot to do with organic unity and understanding. People do misinterpret it when they think that there's going to be an instantaneous poof and everybody's on the same page. That's not going to happen. But this desire to choose to find common ground and be able to have balance and common ground, and that unity that comes with it, and growing a society that way, versus the history that we actually have of more of a domination and control. So we're at this very interesting time, I think, in our history now, where one of the big things that needs to occur in order to move us forward is just knowing what was, and not the storyline that's been told or the history that is tried to be presented to people, but the truth about how things were. And I think a lot of people now can look at the news and look at things they're seeing and feeling not too good about it, feeling like there's a lot of domination and control and deception and whatever. But it's one of those things that we're at this place where we can choose and make a choice to say, I don't need any more of this. Done it, been there, done it. What I want to experience is something else. But you can't change what's going on until you know it's going on. And so the curtain has to be pulled back. You have to see the man behind the curtain. You have to see these things so that everyone's kind of creative consciousness can place a different vote of how they want society to be happening in the future. Now, some people refer to this as the splitting of the densities. There's all kinds of different theories as to what's going on, but in general, so a lot of people seem to be back here now that were a part of certain falls, let's say, in order now to push the other side of the coin, to see how can we create some of these organic endeavors and experience something completely different, because all we've done for quite a long time is circle the toilet, let's say.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know I have past lives, and some of that, rings kind of true of returning to this time and remembering what was done and trying to prevent a second occurrence of it. And so I'm kind of curious if, with your guys' work of, the lifting and your galactic background, there's a lot of talks about, like, for example, some of the Native American tribes today that are in the really bad conditions where they say, oh, that's actually the soldiers and the government bodies who in the 1800s put them in that condition. And so now they're living there, learning what they did and having to face up to the challenge that they made them face and go, hopefully next time you won't repeat this and you've learned your lesson. Do you feel like that type of scenarios does exist on this planet where the roles are reversed and the universe puts you in the roles that you previously created?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see this a lot. I call sometimes some people have a past life and then there's a reciprocal life. What I mean by reciprocal is, say if you did harm in a lifetime, and then now or you've been harmed in a lifetime. See people with past life wounds all the time. And sometimes it's a reciprocal wound where they caused it to somebody and they've had it imprinted within their energy too. I've actually seen that back and forth where different parties will volley back and forth and back and forth. The case in point is when I got into an accident in 2009, when I got hit by a car. I found out the guy that did it was actually an opponent of mine from a different lifetime. And him and I volleyed back and forth and back and forth. And it was up to me this time to end that cycle. And aside from the near-death experience I had where I saw people on the other side, came back after an hour of being pretty much dead at that point. I knew later on, this was months later, I knew eventually I figured out this was a cycle coming to a close. Some people would call it a karmic cycle. Some people would just see the movements of energy back and forth. With the thing with the Native Americans, though, I came to find out that to this point, further back in history, much further back in history, like 3,000 years ago or so, I came to find out when there were more forest people wandering out in the open, the Sasquatch people, and they were more out in the open. What ended up happening was the Native Americans at the time and them eventually got into a war. They called the Bigfoot Wars. If you ask some of the tribes, a lot of them won't talk about it, but there was some misunderstanding between one of the tribes about some children that had been stolen, and that's where you get some of the misnomers about Bigfoot stealing babies and stuff like that. That's a different group that does crap like that, trolls and things of that nature. Different cryptids that get mistaken for them, or they get mistaken for them. But in this instance, what ended up happening was they went to war. The natives won. They ended up basically putting the Sasquatch people in forced territories like reservations. And what ended up happening, this is why you see some of them more in some areas than others, even though the forest people and the Native Americans essentially are descent lineages from Mu and Lemuria, essentially. What ended up happening later on, their descendants, as I said, went to war, and then different territories were designated out for the forest people. This is why you see sometimes the broken trees and the X's. They're basically coordinating out their territories, what now would be their ancestral land. After that, many centuries later, you have the pilgrims that come along and the white settlers that come along, eventually form our government, and the cycle continues, where the natives were put on reservations. It's this cycle that could have been going even further back than the Bigfoot Wars. It could have gone back to the beginning of our history. And it's a cycle that continues until an opposing methodology is formed. It's just like say in the movie The Shining, for instance, where you see there's infected land there and Jack Nicholson's character gets possessed in it. Some things that infect land can echo through history and cause a repeat or a skip through history, where people just get locked into those chains of events over and over and over again, especially if they're really emotional, really oppressive, really really bad, and they can just go on repeat constantly. Negativity seems to do that a lot more than positivity. And just like on battlefields, we went to Gettysburg Battlefield, for instance, a lot of things on repeat. Ghosts were stuck there. There's also soul trap things to be concerned about. There's some negative galactics that gather ghosts and do things out in space with them there. But But there's also different types of energy that are just on play, that there's no interactivity there. It just continues. A living human can lock onto that by mistake if they're not protected enough, and lock into those chains of events that happen, especially if they had a past life in that, where they already have interacting somewhere in the past another version themselves that were there. It really locks them in. This is why people get locked into past lives so much. Like if they're part of their oversoul was there, they're going to lock into this, and they'll mistakenly mirror what's known as mirroring into this time, things that probably don't belong here at the moment, and continue these cycles. When this happens, it can open up an entire can of worms that didn't need to be open. It can result in things happening in your life you don't want to happen, to like from curses to misfortune to lack of abundance, things of that nature. Demons do this too. Demons can be attracted to this, and other demonic life forms and oppressive entities and other aliens and such that want to track this. But at the same time, it's important to, whatever that chain of events was, if the door needs to be closed on that chain of events to end that cycle, and you have to do the exact opposite of what you did there, you do it. There is a very good scene in a animated series years ago by Todd McFarlane. It was Spawn, when that was on years ago. And there was a scene where Merlin and him are having a conversation, and he's saying, in order to escape this curse, you have to become a brand new you. You have to become something different that you've never been before. And in order to escape this Spawn curse that he's under, in order to be a regular Joe again. And then Spawn just kind of blew him off at that point, but didn't get what he was saying. But that's exactly what I'm saying, is in order to escape a lot of these things like lineage curses, it's the same thing, where it's a behavioral pattern that comes from the past. It needs to have the opposite polarity of that you become that in order to break the familial curses. It runs along the same lines because it goes through the genetic memory. You come into this skin suit and you're bringing in not only ancestral stuff, but past life as well. All that information accumulates now. Kind of like in Star Trek, where you have the species called the Trill, where they have all the other lifetimes with them. It's like that, where you're bringing all that information in. You may not have been that, you may not be that person now, but the energy still's with you. And in order to not be whatever that was that made that mistake then, you have to be something different now. Or if something applied then that was actually benevolent, it may not work now. It may not fit now. It may have been cookie cutter in that century, but it may not apply to this one. The energies and the perspectives and perceptions are vastly different, you see. Or something from those time frames may be needed now, desperately needed. Something humanity forgot. You go to those records and bring it into the now. And I've seen both and all in between. Sometimes I'll recognize if somebody's bringing in too much of something, or like say if you go into a library, you wouldn't walk about with every single book. You'd walk out with one, and you'd read it chapter by chapter, page by page. That's what ends up having to happen. And only if you really need that book. You wouldn't come out with 10 more that you don't need. People tend to, in past life regressions, they go gung-ho and grab 10 more books they probably don't need, and they're just sitting open on a shelf somewhere in their own home, and they never read them, but yet the effects of those books are still there. They're still taking up the space and taking up the weight within the volume of their home. People make that mistake a lot. They don't just grab the one thing they need. They want to see all of it. And you could really
and they romanticize. So
the
one thing that we talk about is saying that, not having a full memory, truly not having a full memory. Like we brought up the examples of, Egypt, you know what I mean? Or Lemuria, or, Atlantis. People may have these minor fleeting moments of something that they start romanticizing, and it's not actually the energies that were really there at the time and what was causing the downfall of society. So
especially Atlantis,
especially in Atlantis, and what was really going on. That's why, again, we like to talk a lot about the galactic, our history, the whole galactic history, and these histories, to give people a better perspective. Because what tends to happen in that romanticizing is everybody wants it back. But negativity is wanting people to want it back, because when you open that, they're going to flood in those same energies again, almost to try and recreate a fall again.
And Atlantis made that exact mistake, actually, from a war that came many, many centuries before them.
So it's a very interesting dynamic that occurs. It's just really not very well understood. So it's one of the things that we like to talk about, of how you may get caught up in things that you really don't want to get caught up. You know, there is current present moment where we are and what we're doing. To be able to, be able to pull out of your vast library that at one lifetime you were a great orator, and I need to be a great orator this moment. I'm just going to focus and bring down those energies to do this, and then put that book back, as we say. That's one thing. But to really try and bring in and recreate something, what we tend to find is that there is a lot of misunderstanding of what was really around them and what the energies were, and why there is a lot of desire. Sometimes the desire to do that is actually something trying to make you desire it, because they're trying to push something through it at the same time. And people really kind of need to understand these dynamics. The one thing I want to say about the whole Indian thing is, again, when we talk about things, we do say throughout our history we're negative, unwanted forces. Okay. And as much as people want to talk about, good and benevolence, there's malevolent and domination and control aspects to what's gone on in our existence. And what that has tried to cause over time is what we call a self-farming, where people will continually make these same mistakes. And whether you call it a karmic issue or whatever, keep doing it over and over again to kind of get people trapped in a cycle versus expanding and growing. I think one of the hardest things that we saw when we were in Arizona before coming back here to Virginia is some examples of that. And some of the burdens that really should have never been put on the Indians, like the keeper of the lands. Do you understand? The keeper of something so great, but in truth, the earth doesn't need a keeper.
That actually came from Lemuria, and some people then were appointed to watch certain objects and certain things in certain areas. Like there was a watchtower, like you have a guard guarding a prison, a jail, a record keeping, a library. And that passed on to them as like a keeper of the flame or like a steward. And that passed down into legend after a while.
Right. And so sometimes when you are led to believe that is your role, even though, let's just say, the earth itself does not need that role for humans to play in any way, shape, or form, what would you actually be willing to do to honor that, to ensure it occurs? And one of the things that we ran into a lot were merged Indians and monsters, basically. And what happened, unfortunately, during those times, and they were horrible times, the Trail of Tears, horrible, 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 not saying anything good. But when you get into that kind of desperation, you actually yourself start doing things that curse the cursing. The one thing about the Indians in general is that they were quite spiritually evolved, psionically evolved. And unfortunately, again, let's just call them the negative powers that be that influence people, didn't want lines that were psionically evolved. Okay, they didn't want it. They actually would cause wars to try and kill out those lines. So some of this, warring and different thing that was done, instead of unifying and being able to get together, was done by bigger forces.
That's why the United States government came and introduced smallpox, all those things, because they had negative forces like reptilians and such, basically psionically getting them to do that, to wage war on the descendants of some of their enemies from the past, is what that was.
So again, so you have all these dynamics going on, and then then you have a tendency yourself to do things that aren't good. When you are psionically capable and you can conjure, and these people knew what they were doing, and especially, I hate to say it, but young men, with that great amount of force that comes with, these younger men who are becoming warriors and their belief system, to be able to conjure some of these beings that have been heard as skinwalkers and different things like that. But what happened within their own creation, a lot of them got merged with the being. And so one of the things that we got and had to get involved with sometimes was, again, if you can imagine this happening 150 or so or longer years ago, and then having that merging happen, that soul is still there, merged now into a monster form. And so basically, Chris would have to try to separate them to allow the soul to move on, to not be stuck here anymore. But these types of almost chasing your tail like a snake, you know what I mean? Eating your own tail. Those are the kind of dynamics that would be set up by something, an energy that was not good, that's been around, like I said, forever. And people, again, would get caught up. And if you think about what I'm saying right now, you can see it in our lives right now, right? People getting caught up and thinking, maybe, when they're in their more sane mind, they would never think of things that they're thinking of right now that they want to do to somebody else or want to cause in a society or this, that, and the other, because these energies are spinning up and causing chaos in people's minds, their hearts, their souls. All that is happening now, and it's happened over time. It happened during those warring times. And again, most of us now that are here are always working on resolution, whether we realize it or not, to some of these past lives. So you may have people coming in and out of your life that you don't even realize, that are from something else in the past that you're not even thinking of. And you're supposed to have an interaction. You're supposed to have something with them in order to end, as Chris was saying, something. So it's not just happening to people who happen to look for it, right? By looking at why is this situation going on and looking, is there a past life that was related to? Most everybody walking the planet is involved in doing these things. I refer to it as, we were all beautiful, shiny new Rubik's Cubes, got all messed up throughout time. And now we're slowly trying to get balance within that again. And so we have a lot of interactions, everyone does, that are in their lives that are all about that healing from the past.
And going back a little bit to, like Chris was saying, with the land influencing people, I can't help looking at like the Civil War, where some areas were more, I guess you could say, vicious and bloody and gory than other spots. And some were never supposed to happen, but it was like like circumstances just stumbled both armies head to head unexpectedly, or like just an encounter where the carnage would just not stop. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering because when you sit here and you think about like the Civil War for America is most unique because it's brother versus brother, father versus son, or father versus, his brother. And so it's like this was all family fighting family. What would cause, they all say, oh, they were patriotic and that's what drew them to arms. But to me, it just seems like I've never seen a conflict between family to this scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the battles that I'm talking about is like Gettysburg, where it's 3 days. And, it's like horrendous, fighting in town, fighting outside of town, fighting wherever they can fight. And they were never supposed to fight there. That was not a battlefield. Both sides admitted, we don't know how we found each other here. Our scouts couldn't find the armies. and they just walked up and pretty much just smacked into each other. But the one that I find even more interesting is Antietam, to where it's the bloodiest in history, never been equaled, more so than most wars, of a day, because they say it took place in a day. That even like World War I and World War II, a day of combat does not equal that day of Antietam. What could drive someone to that level? Because I would imagine at some point you have to wake up and say, wait a minute, we're not getting anywhere. Let's stop, try again tomorrow, or, let's cut our losses and go. What would cause someone to want to just keep going until there was like no one left?
This is actually an interesting topic because some people have asked me about a lot of the different conflicts in history that were quite similar. And it goes back way back to the beginnings of our history. There are different galactic groups out there that I call this the hedge betting of the gods, pretty much. You see those movies where, like, say, the Greek gods are playing chess with people, like in the movie Jason and the Argonauts, for instance, where you see them moving chess pieces around and things of that nature. Or you see in movies generals moving, like military generals moving pieces around a map, saying, "Okay, we'll go here, we'll go do this." Think of ETs doing this and trying to hedge bet basically on a one group or another to be a particular army, that their army. This is why you see different armies in different countries had different gods backing them, because these were different ET groups that were all playing these big chess games. And what this was when the Civil War is no different, where they were seeing what this continent would, or this country would look like after a while. What would be the army that would best suit, or the Union or the Confederacy, what would best suit? This happened with Nazi Germany as well. You had an ET group backing them as well. That's how they advanced themselves so quickly with the Nazi Bellcraft and everything. That's what there was another group that came in, that noticed some aliens screwing around with the Nazis. So they advanced the United States and Great Britain a little bit too, with some of the weapons technology to even the playing field. So you had this hedge betting going. You have galactic treaties out there that when one group steps in too far, another one has to, and then it becomes a big cluster after a while. You also have some groups playing a game of D&D where they're rolling the dice and character creating. They'll even create a country, on a whim, basically saying, okay, this is our people now. And then you have another group, no, I'm planting my flag. This is why humans started self-farming that after a while, where territory, you saw that happening all the time. We call this the hedge bets of the gods, because you see it. Imagine like a big group standing over a craps table in Vegas or something like that, where they're putting chips down, or roulette, or cards, or blackjack, something, where they are betting a certain amount on something, that some event will happen in the way they feel it will happen. Some channelings are this way too, where a particular group will back a particular person or a particular set of people. They may be truly benevolent with no conflicting agendas. These are the beings we deal with. Or you might have some group that go, wait a minute, I have a golden opportunity for resources here. I have a golden opportunity to maybe push this person or these people as far as I see if they can take it until they crack. Then you have some that are in the middle that will test you for what they think is a benevolent purpose, to see if you can actually take a pounding and still stand. You have a lot of these different groups that are actively working even today, especially today, given what you see all over the place, what's happening right now. That the Civil War is no different than any other conflict. That's also why it was so bloody. It's because, say, if you were playing a video game and you got to a really ugly spot that you got fed up with, say, dying, a couple of times. You're playing a game and you're going, okay, I'm going to try something different to where I can just take out as many enemies at once. And you have fun just going around and just slaughtering everything. Some of those hedge bets turn into that. Some of those some alien goes, screw it, I'm going to try this. And this doesn't seem to be working. My hand is losing. I'm going to go for broke. And this is essentially Vegas on acid, pretty much, where you have the rolling of the dice taking place at the craps table.
Now, many times also during these particular periods, you also have souls incarnating who need to experience war. So I don't, we're not just saying that everyone's controlled by aliens.
Oh, no,
it's
no,
a
no,
combination.
It's the oversoul that does
It's
it,
a combination of a bunch of things. But people during these periods of time, during these world wars, they came in already primed for the soul experience. Now, again, most likely as a balancing to other things that have potentially happened for some of them. And so what you have, though, what we're talking about with kind of the hedge betting, and again, we contend that there has been influencing that has happened since humanity was in existence here. And so what we're saying is that you can take a dynamic that's going to have to play out, okay? The energies are going to build because people want this certain experience. They need it for a balancing. Then you've got these hedge betting gods that are going to ramp it up 20, 30, 40 times, right? Even more than the experience they really need. What they tend to do, again, is when you talk about living in certain energy frequencies, there are certain energy frequencies that if they can compress you down and down, they are truly the bottom line survival skills. You're in that mentality, and you're so far into that mentality, it becomes very brutal. It is not thinking of any higher reasoning. It is literally survival of the fittest, and your mind cannot get out of that, even if in a moment you don't need to be that way. So the outside influences can push people's energy to be in a certain frequency zone that is going to make it like that. And so you've got this storm of things that are occurring because in general, negativity and everything don't create out of nothing. Usually they have to take something existing and then they
continue to mold it.
And they continue to mold it or grow it or do something like that. But these types of dynamics and interactions have been there forever. And then again, souls then have those experiences and come back in and are now actually at a point where most places, most people don't want war. Most people are starting to see wait a minute, what is going on around the world? Wait a minute, we don't want this type of experience. Now, again, all pockets of the world are not on the same frequency playing field. You can see, maybe behaviors in the Middle East and some of those countries that you're like, man, that's like medieval times, right? And so we're not all at the exact same place. We're all in different places. But again, what we try to say is we went down the toilet first. We didn't do the best of us first. We went from a place, we fell, we went down. And now the goal is to come up out of it and basically get rid of the mud that's mucked us up so we know who we are, so that we can create now the other side of the coin, which is more of, again, learning to get along, learning how deception occurs, learning, again, how these energies work. A great example that I've used before is just current events, and it was the attempted assassination of a presidential candidate in Butler, right? In Butler, Pennsylvania, where he happened to turn his head and didn't get shot in the head. So those energy dynamics before that, if people can really remember what was going on, you had half the country that was getting so low in their energy, they wanted him taken out. And really, here we are in 2024, and the best you can come up with, we can't get along. You got to, take them out. You have that much hatred. And then you had another part opposing that, just completely opposing that. And so those types of feelings of anger or rage or support, whatever side it was on, were accentuated, a powder keg ready to explode. That energy had to be released. And so in general, what happened in that very unfortunate day is everybody was satisfied. Okay, there was that attempt. there was somebody who was executed that day, that fireman. He was executed that day. It wasn't who they wanted, but that energy got released of an execution that was demanded. And then you also had the energy of those who wanted the survival to happen and for this person to be able to do what they wanted. That was honored as well, because you had almost equal opposing forces that it was raising to the level of something needing to occur. Now, for a lot of people after that event, they had to take themselves back a bit and reevaluate themselves and their own personal feelings towards this. Is that what I really would have wanted? Really? Is that? And they had to quietly and internally
no matter
say,
who thought what about whom.
That's what I'm saying, a reevaluation. So in the end, people had to reevaluate, who am I? What do I really want? What do I really stand for? But when energies start turning in such a way, and then you have the amplification, of forces that are out there trying to do it, that will cause what we refer to as kind of a watershed moment. It's got to happen. That energy must somehow be released. So one of the things that we say right now with people is what you have to understand is that these dynamics exist. You have to constantly check yourself. Are you truly being your genuine, authentic self? Because everybody can, we have the full range of emotions. If someone punched you in the face, you would maybe punch them back, or at least be very, very mad. And maybe even for a brief second, I wish you were dead, right? You can get that. But when these thoughts start amplifying, and it's a revolving circle in people's minds, what we want people to think is that may be something trying to amplify your thoughts and get you to be something that maybe you are not. So you always have to check yourself and know who you are and work on that constantly, because these energies to do things like that are streaming in. No one in the earth is exempt from them. It's happening to everyone, especially right now. But that's how these crazy energy dynamics work, the unseen world that people can't see. But the more you know about it, the more you can do things about it within yourself, within your family and community. And that's what we really want people to know.
That's true. And I feel like throughout our history, if you know what you're looking for, there have been instances, like an example is, I'm not sure if you saw the movie Immortals, where the gods were coming down and taking human form and coercing one way or another and manipulating, and they were fighting amongst themselves over who was manipulating who and who was right, who was wrong. Well, I feel like when we look at history, whether real or not, like the Knights of the Round Table, I did some research after, I think it was Laura Eisenhower pointed out they were tied to the zodiac. And I was like, never knew that. Well, when I figured out they were tied to the zodiac, I took it a step further and was like, well, maybe they're tied to a star race. And, they were star beings. That's why they were pedestaled above the rest and didn't act like the other kings and knights of the realm of the time. And that's why I say, whether they existed or not, they were made an example of and was an artificial race, meaning not natural to the earth, influencing. And then another example, I feel like, was one that was someone who was misunderstood. I feel like in World War II, Patton, because he would sit there and say, over there is the battlefield. And they'd say, sir, the troops are up ahead. He goes, no, that was the other battlefield I was here on. And he knew where he was and where all his past lives there. But he also knew how to maneuver his troops in a way nobody else could. And You look at the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, we were overrun, surrounded. There was no way that army was ever going to be rescued. And in 2 days, he wiped out all the surrounding troops and they all withdrew. And everyone was like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this. But I feel like it's because he saw things and was not fully, I would say, human, more like Star Being hybrid, where he had access to knowledge. And I mean, yeah, there's that instance of Patton slapping the soldier, but I mean, look at what it did. It got all his men were like, we didn't need him to apologize. We didn't need him to do this or that. We would follow him anywhere. They didn't care about it. But everybody else was like, oh, we had to follow the optics. And that's where he didn't care about optics.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you brought up Patton because I found out Rommel, his opponent, was the same way, where he came in with some knowledge, but he was on the opposing side. You see, he was also influenced by those very ETs I was talking about. The other ones on the British and the American side, I believe, are the ones fueling men like Patton. And he came in with more past life knowledge, but I believe he was at least part of one of the other races. They call themselves the Mosen, but they claim they're from Cassiopeia. But at the same time, they look human enough to where they could integrate into our armies. Whenever I see them show up, they look like World War I soldiers or World War II soldiers. I've seen some even tried to integrate into the Nazi side to infiltrate it as well, because some of their enemies were over there. See, some galactic treaties were violated, and they had to integrate into the armies to be able to kind of quell things. But with Patton, I believe he falls under that particular category.
Right, and if you remember, Patton's most famous phrases were always like, especially in Africa, he's like, "Where's Rommel? Get me to Rommel. We got to go after Rommel." Everything was Rommel. And then when he was in Italy, he's like, well, we got to beat Montgomery, for fame. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably was some ego playing in there. But I feel like everything he was doing was getting him to a face-off with Rommel. And Rommel was also pointing out and saying, my God, I'm glad Patton's not here. When he was in Normandy, he's like, thank God there's Patton's not here. And then when he was in France, they handcuffed him basically and said, no, we can't let you do this, and wait for orders, and allowed the Germans to escape. And it's like, you can't help wondering, why would anybody ever in a state of war let the enemy escape to regroup? There's so many fishy little nuances in the battles that people don't pay attention to, because all they care about is, oh yeah, America won World War II on paper.
On paper, yeah, that's exactly it. What they did was just somebody was ordering them to allow them to escape to eventually start the next stage of wars and battles. See, on paper, the United States won. In reality, the Nazis didn't lose. I'm not saying they're completely the victor. I'm saying they didn't lose. And what ended up happening was what they did was, what if you want to make people believe that you've died? It's like that old phrase, the greatest trick the devil ever performed on people is getting people to believe he didn't exist. It's that same trick the Nazis used, where they basically went underground. They went to Antarctica, Argentina, eventually the moon, Mars, and Ceres too. Out in space, you have the Martian Germans as a result of this. And they went to Antarctica to work on their spacecraft. Well, then they could figure out how to get off planet. And so this with the alien tech that they acquired, they knew they had to hide, but they knew when Admiral Byrd showed up, they could easily wallop them. And so yeah, this is how this actually turned out. You're seeing more of the hedge betting but you're also seeing how these different groups basically move these chess pieces all over the map, and how far they're willing to take this hedge betting. And many people, like I said, believe the Nazis lost. And I said this at the Disclosure Now conference, whereas there's this famous MacGyver episode where he eventually finds out that the Nazis are still in operation, in the United States. A Jewish man comes to him and says, please look into this. At the end, this German lady, basically, he finds this German lady that's a watcher for a neighborhood, an older lady. And she basically said, Hitler moved too quickly. We have to move slowly, integrating into society. They mention Operation Paperclip with the scientists coming over and everything. And they show a pegboard at the end with a bunch of people that were representing operatives that were judges, policemen, politicians, everything. And they showed there was like 1 million pegs on the board, so basically showing where they slowly but surely started to manicure, not only manicure other people, but integrate themselves into society very slow to where they weren't noticed generationally. And that happens to be a fact. Post World War II. This is the reason why they weren't letting some of these people die. The higher muckety mucks, higher than our government, were basically saying, no, we want these particular people to live, like Werner von Braun, for instance, eventually, becoming the head of NASA. So, but what happened there? That's essentially that integration in real time.
And so one of the things that we, again, talk about is the concept of time and planning, because, again, some of these energies, forces, whatever you want to refer to it as, they've been in existence forever. They've been behind the scenes forever. And so what you have was, things that were going on behind the scenes that even the United States and people were involved in, that there was already thought and process of, even well before World War II, of getting into the galactic community, moving out into the galactics. Now you have kind of this conversation where you have, the only way to really separate it is to say the surface dwellers, what's going on with the surface dwellers versus what's going on at a whole nother different level. And so, you have these conversations, and there is a definite, organized way of, again, keeping the surface dwellers busy in a certain place of their knowledge of what they have access to. And then with agreements and with different things that came along, to be able to take groups of people and prepare them for a more galactic side, a more galactic mindset. And I wish I could say that, again, the thought was that everyone was equal. But one of the first things that happened was to convince people that somehow they were superior and different genetics and different whatever than regular surface people. And so they don't even really see themselves. That's how you see some of these inhumanities when you're actually involved in, conversations where some of this is being driven by humans, but those humans don't think that they're any way, shape, or form related to you. So they just see themselves as something different. And then the negative forces behind them, these hedge betting of the gods and all of these things, but we're more than happy to groom them to think that. Because the one thing that these forces will love to do is to let you think you know everything. Because those are the easiest people to control. The ones who feel they've got the top, the ones they feel they know everything, they'll be happy to garden that like nobody's in the business.
They consider themselves the master race over
right,
everybody.
And whatever, because they're the easier ones to control.
They were of the same mindset as those ETs. See, so they were
and again, the ETs would let them think they were equal or superior when they weren't. They, you know what I mean? And so you have to understand that this story, again, is a story where there, is a splitting that was groomed to split. Even since the time of Atlantis, this grooming was occurring, with these different people. And, some people refer to that as the cabal family lineages, and they actually feel like they can trace their lineage back to people on Mars or people. There is truth to all of that because, again, there's a greater galactic history that people don't understand. And so,
like when Hitler said the German people were descended from Atlantis, he was not entirely wrong. He was just trying to center it on his own, but it's most of the Scandinavian everything and Celtic everything came from Atlantis.
Right. So this is a hard thing for people to kind of wrap around their head, to think that it's such a bigger picture. And so, and again, what do regular folks, have access to versus what do they have? What is the technology level that they have access to, and what is the technology level that is allowed the surface people? Let's just put it that way. These kinds of concepts actually are there. There really is a space fleet out there. Absolutely. Behind the scenes, the countries get along in some of their space adventures. They're not the warring factions that they appear to be on Earth, the show that's being done on Earth. And so it's a very complicated story that, some people are ready to look into. Some people are not ready to hear any of this, and which is okay. But if you can sit back and listen to some of the history of everything and, our understanding and what's been told to us of what's there, everything that's going on right now makes sense. It's not nice. It's not pretty. It is certainly not fair, but it all makes sense to when you take into consideration a much larger story. Now, again, are people just helpless to it? Absolutely not. Because one of the other dynamics is the fact that we are co-creative beings, but we've been co-creating for other people's benefits. A lot of our natural skills that we're born in with were subverted to their liking, easily being told this is what's going to happen. Then, I guess this is what's going to happen. Do you see what I mean? And so this stuff has been going on. It's a big, big picture. It involves everything you're talking about, the wars that have been involved, the level and the mentality of people in them, and even in other situations that were brutal, that were non-war issues. So it's really complicated, and a lot of it, just looking at it, won't make sense because, again, there's a bigger picture behind it. So that's kind of what we try to do to help bring all of that to light.
All right. And one thing I just was remembering because I was listening to a program about letters home from World War I that I found really interesting and never really thought about was America's forces were like 120,000 at that point because, we were not in a position where we needed a large army. We were pretty well getting along with our neighbors. So it was like, we don't need to mass produce weapons or don't need to create a large army, which, 120,000 is not a small army. But when you look at the scale of World War I, when you have millions, 120,000 is small. But the point I was getting to is they were saying that England and France was anxious to get America into the war, but the surprising thing was no generals at that time knew how to fight a war because we had been out of war so long that it's like our entire military was like, we play war, we train for war, but we don't actually know how to fight a war. And there were so many missed opportunities, they were saying, in World War I and II because of that fact, where they were like, we had to hold the Americans back until there was at least 1 million of them ready to go, because then we could fight on equal terms. And it was like, And I thought about it and I was looking at it going, yeah, we may have had, say, 200,000 troops in France in World War One, but there were so many instances where those would have been enough to liberate an area, in which case you could have brought in reinforcements, reinforced it with more, gained territory, maybe ended the war a year early. Who knows? But it's interesting that the leadership would say, we're not engaging until we have this many boots on the ground, and didn't even pay attention to what was going on in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the powers that be always feel they know more than the troops on the ground, or they have a different idea of how they want to approach a situation, or they have a set of plans of, like I said, a hedge betting going on of how they want to move the chess pieces. Like you seen in several war movies, like I saw this one scene that was set over in the Middle East with our soldiers going, well, here, we see that we can actually attack the enemy here, here, and here, but our powers that be at home say we have to do it this way. It didn't make any sense. It was a mismatch of how they wanted to proceed, and that goes with what we were saying before. They have a set cookie cutter plan in mind of how what they want the globe to look like, how they want their battlefield to look like, and how they want everything to go. Now, say if they did follow that plan that the powers that be told them, and they lose, then who's blamed for it? The soldiers on the ground. But the soldiers on the ground can see what's actually going on. Now, say even if they change the plan and they go with their own and they succeed, they're still blamed for not following the original plan, is it? So I've seen that before. I've even read soldiers in sessions before. They've run into this exact same thing in the Middle East when, like, I've read people from Afghanistan. Soldiers that have been over Afghanistan and such, and they've told me this exact same thing. This falls back on who's telling who what in the background.
And again, the agendas. So, I'm sorry to say, but even back then, there were agendas to make money off of war goods.
Yes, like the Rothschilds with the Napoleonic conflict.
You know what I mean? You have, again, persons in positions where human life isn't as important as how much they can make in profit, and they have to sell their goods and continue to sell their goods in order to do that. I mean, I wish it weren't like that, but you have people in positions, they're there now, that are in these positions that it's not about doing an efficient dealing with the problem. It's going to be a long, drawn out mess, because we've got a lot of product to sell. Do you see what I mean? The war machine. And so that war machine is going to run because there is a lot of pressure to run it for all kinds of reasons. And so what is interesting, again, right now, where are we now compared to them, is, there is a lot of pushback from just people who now are not wanting to do it. They're not falling for it. It's a no, and so you've got war trying to be created and supported now on other parts of the globe right now, and regular Americans and most people want nothing to do with it. They're not lending their energies to it. They're saying no, but then you've got a war machine, again, saying that it's very complicated. I'm not saying there aren't people causing trouble out there. There are people causing trouble out there for all kinds of reasons, for gaslighting over the centuries, for gaslighting that has occurred, that have caused religious tensions, for all kinds of reasons. That gaslighting has been going on for a long time. You add in, the fact that there is a war machine with product to sell and profit to make. And then you've got a lot of these dynamics, but you also have an opposing force in humanity that is saying, we do not want to experience this anymore. We want to experience something else. So this is where you've got all of those now dynamics from humans that are co-creative beings that can actually, again, I always joke and I say, you should be watching TV, and when anybody who says some war is inevitable, your first answer should be no. And it's no, because I said it's no. You know, I'm not going to agree to this. The answer is no. It's not the way I want our world to go. And so this is kind of that psyops that happens to get people to agree that these things are inevitable, that these things are going to happen, that we're going to get drug into it. And so you have to fight that psyops as well with your, I'm assuming most people's desire to not want to see it happen, but people don't really understand themselves, their co-creative skills. Again, there was all kinds of reasons why things happened in the past, but some of it's just trying to recycle itself right now. But people have tied up karmic issues in a nice, pretty bow. And now it's kind of like this free choice time of which way you want this to go. And so people often ask, well, where are we going? And we're like, where do you want to go? What do you want your experience to be? You know, what do you want your life to look like? Because everything's now being uncovered so that people can make those choices.
Right. And I'm noticing a trend lately in Hollywood where I know a lot of Hollywood is under dual control and they have dual agendas. But one thing I find interesting is, like, I mean, say what you will about Hollywood wanting to propagandize something. Saving Private Ryan, I think, was the exact opposite. I think it really drove into home. A lot of people were starting to question, do I want to sign up to face this? This is not what they told us it was going to be like. And the other movie, I think, and I'm curious, Christopher, your take on it is the we Are Soldiers, I think it was, the Vietnam movie, where they spent so many men holding that hill. And then I found it so interesting. They showed and even told at the end how they had just didn't stop where they stopped and went completely over the hill, would have taken out their generals, would have pretty much eliminated their army corps. And so it's interesting that they would point out in that movie saying, look, we held the ground we were supposed to hold, but the war would have been over and we would have had a victory if we had went on and weren't held back. And the fact that America claims never to have lost a war because they call Vietnam a conflict. They don't actually, history books are wrong when they say the Vietnam War. It was the Vietnam conflict. And that's how they can keep the adage of America has never lost a war.
Yeah, exactly. You know, this is that was definitely propagandized because the whole Vietnam conflict did not necessarily need to take place at all, and it was actually the beginnings of it was a false flag event. And you and I found out this material about, I believe it was Jim Morrison's father and Jim Morrison of the Doors. Actually, was one of them that fired some of the first shots. It was at the Tompkins Gulf or Gulf of Tompkins. So, you know, basically saying, oh, they're coming right for us. So we get drawn into another conflict. But it was over resources is what it was for. I came to find out. It was over, at that time, MJ-12 wanted to actually get funding for other resources. And they knew to gain other resources. So they knew getting involved in these conflicts would get them these resources globally. This is why you see things, all this happening in the Middle East. They wanted their overlords out there wanted an army going into the Middle East looking for ancient alien tech. This is what happened with Hitler. Why the reptilians and such wanted him marching into Poland looking for old Tartarian technology and things of that nature. Things that were lost to some of these groups that could give them some tactical advantage. In this, it was no different for humans and in human conflicts. like the Rothschilds during the Napoleonic conflict, selling weapons to both sides. It was to gain monetary value and some more resources in some form or fashion. Humans have done this all by themselves too. So without help, they've self-farmed this ideal, but they've learned. It's kind of like in the movie Wonder Woman, where the first one, where Wonder Woman thinks by eliminating Ares that humanity was somehow going to go back to a utopic mindset. And then Chris Pine's character looks around and goes, maybe this is who they are. Maybe they want this, you know. And so she had to think about that. This is the same thing. Some of these souls came in because this is something they wanted to experience. And this is exactly what happened with that. I'm not justifying any of these conflicts. I think it's evil. But at the same time, I believe some of these movies showing, you know, how there's good in doing something like that, that we had to absolutely be in Vietnam. I don't agree we had to be there at all. It was just more of a resource grab. The same in the Middle East. It was a resource grab. And
Right.
some say it was over oil, but I believe it was over. Oil was like the front story. I mean, granted, they did take that too, but there were other resources: gold, alien tech, ancient historical information that they wanted to keep from the public. All of that, anything to do with aliens, all of that, were there.
So there's a great book. The book that we're talking about is called Weird Scenes in the Canyon. And if you look up that book, Weird Scenes in the Canyon, it really describes the fact that when this conflict was being planned out, okay, not as a response to anything, but a conflict being planned out to occur. What, you know, when you want to do that, you have to actually be both sides of the fence. You've got
I call it the for and against conspiracy.
Right. So what that describes is specifically that conflict, that war, and how both sides, ones against the war, the ones for the war, were actually the same. And who were they and what did they do? It just happened to revolve around, again, Jim Morrison and his father and some of their things. But it's a great book to read because, again, I'm always really
one pro-war, one against. Yeah.
Really big into the strategy of how humanity and humans, or people of the United States, or whomever the group is at the time, is, you know, lulled in to this, allowing this to occur. And that really tries to describe the, you know, the circumstances and where these certain meetings were happened and who were the key players, and the fact that they're, you know, father, son, you know, they're all related. You know what I mean? And we're playing both sides of the coin at the time to, you know, fulfill the drama of all of this, the for and against of all of this. And that happens. So sometimes these events that come out to play out are really planned out events, you know, for a lot of reasons, to cause chaos, to cause certain things, to cause a changing of society and how they feel. It really is. I wish I could say a lot of it was just plain, in a sense, good guy versus bad guy, and that's all it was about, but it's not. And, you know, and that's a great book to look at to get a better understanding of really some of the dynamics behind that one.
All right. Well, we're starting to run short on some time. So I want to give you guys a chance to share kind of the mission statement and goals for the lifting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the goal is basically to put out information that could further, you know, the energetics, could basically open people up to all of these possibilities. I'm not saying forcibly wake people up. That's evangelical. That's evangelizing. You don't ever want to do that. It's more like planting the seed of information. They either water that seed or they don't. You plant that the seed of information, and it spreads via the energy in multiple places. We inform people in different areas that normally people don't think about, or they think they know. They think they know all about a particular thing. We try to give a different spin or a different angle on that. And also clearing energies as we go along. We've gone along and cleared different places, including we tried Gettysburg. That was actually a failure on my part. But we also tried to clear the Georgia Guidestones while they were still up as well. We've done these things. We mark shungite grids all over the place. I leave my orgone pieces all over the place. I leave sigils all over the place. We still continue the energetic work in the background, and we also inform of things that are actually going on that we run into that might be a concept that people, like I said, they think they know. Some of the things that we want to actually do in the future is actually expand on a lot of information that we used to talk about and maybe didn't go any further with something. Maybe even continue on get a different spin on our own viewpoint when we first started lifting. So people will see that some episodes are missing from our repertoire, or going back and redoing certain things. Maybe I channeled a being I shouldn't have, that I learned not to now. Maybe we said something that we didn't expand on enough. Maybe we said something we shouldn't have, that maybe was incorrect at the time. But it was just our learning experience at that moment in time. So we're going back on all of this. We're continuing to grow our own information. So, Joanna, did you want to add something?
No, I don't have anything to add. I just hope if everyone found this conversation interesting. We're just so happy you allowed us to participate, Michael, and, look forward to doing any other chats again.
Yes, and I appreciate you both coming on and sharing this information. And I have to agree is, listening to it now, a lot of people may be like, not quite so sure what they're talking about. Maybe this is an episode that's too far for me, but then 6 months down the road, or 6 weeks or 6 days down the road, they're going to be like, didn't I see an episode about this? And then they'll rewatch it and be like, now this makes sense. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast shows. And I actually leave mine up and don't change them, because it's a timeline of where people can watch and say, okay, so this is what was thought at this time. And then watch a few episodes later and be like, oh, well, he just contradicted something he said 2 episodes ago. Interesting. I like this new thought better. And maybe 3 episodes later being going, well, I liked this one, but maybe not so much this one. So I'll keep this one, and, so on and so on, to where seeds, like you're saying, are planted and weaved and watered when they're meant to be watered. And so that's the goal of my shows, is for the seeds to be planted and watered whenever they choose to. And the only thing I ever say about that is, whenever you decide to water it, if I'm around, I'll gladly assist you in watering it further. Or if I'm not around, then I hope you're in the middle of the episode, so you have more episodes to learn from it. You're not stuck at the end going, oh crap, now what?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Well, it was really nice to meet everybody at the 2024 conference. It was nice to get around people again that are sharing some similar thought process and similar, goals and desires to expand conversation, to help us all grow a little bit more in our thoughts, in our thoughts about history, about what's upcoming for humanity, and, about our current present moment situations as well. So we really enjoyed participating in that, meeting people and meeting you. And, look forward to doing more together with everybody down the road.
All right. Are you guys going to be at the Disclosure Now 2025?
Yes.
Absolutely, we're going to be at the Disclosure Now.
I'll be there too. I'm coming to that one.
Exactly. I think it's a nice, organic, like I said, very organic, attempt to grow a unity. We don't have to agree on everything, but there's enough commonality that, what I mean, that we all recognize the importance of information and newer information getting out for people to think about and talk about. And that's what's wonderful.
Well, and Joanna, to piggyback on that, I think it's more beneficial that we don't agree on everything, because the second we agree on everything, we stop growing and we become exactly that of which we're saying we don't want to be a part of. So I think that's a great sign that we keep having those little, as long as they're respectful. That's where I draw the line. If you're having a disagreement and you're getting disrespectful about it, then I'll just tune you out and be like, we're done.
Right. And that's what organic unity is all about, that people learn. Unfortunately, everything around us is trying to teach people it's either all or nothing. And that's really not what a unity is all about. It's about certain foundational beliefs. And then, you can agree to disagree because, no one actually knows. You know what I mean? We're speculating and we're pondering. So no, I think this is a good, the 2024 conference was a great conference to jump off from. I think there are the goals, you know what I mean? That those foundational goals are starting to develop, as you're saying, to agree to disagree. And again, and I agree 1,000% with what you just said. I'm like, if I'm being told I'm always right, I know something's wrong. You know what I mean? Because no one is always right. And so, we can't be being, told that. In fact, we had some beings doing that we no longer work with.
Yeah, they basically
like, no
either
way.
declared themselves correct or that they were promising things that never came to fruition.
And it's just not true. And it's not meant to be that way. So we do have to relearn, and I mean relearn, because they're trying to snuff it out of everybody, how to get along and play nice in the sandboxes and show dignity and respect with a common theme that everyone can agree on. So I really look forward to seeing how this all moves forward.
Right. And with the predictions, there's two flaws in my mind that follows with predictions. Is one, the second you've said it into motion. So it's, a creation, not a prediction. And you're stating it in a timetable where time is only existing here. So how do they understand our time when they don't have a time reference to base it off of? And the second part is, then by saying this is going to happen in this month on this day, they're not taking into account the free will of everyone that goes, hey, wait a second. That's not, in my viewpoint of that month and that year. So I'm not putting energy into it, and it comes and passes and doesn't happen. And everyone's like, oh, you guys were wrong. No, they weren't wrong. It's just free will overrode. Mm-hmm. That's why they say the future is not written. Well, actually, the true statement is the future is not cast in stone.
Mm-hmm.
It is written, but it's not in stone, meaning it can still be changed.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, most definitely. And also there's a multitude of different timelines you're working from too. What's true on one isn't true for another. So that's what the multiverse is about. I could go on about that.
Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Yeah, that's a whole other
show. We can have a whole nother episode for that.
Yeah. Technically, one of our guides, Isaac, said technically that there should be an infinite amount of episodes about that. But that's the running joke right there. But yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on, and thank you to everyone in the chat room who asked questions and was commenting along with us, and to everyone who's watching. And one thing I like to do as my last question, and I know I told you guys in full disclosure that I only asked one question, but I kind of forgot about the end of the show question. So forgive me that one. Like we said, we're a little tired. But my last question I always like to say and ask is, from your life experience, doesn't have to be over any topics we discussed. It can be from any point in your life. What is a golden nugget you want to leave the audience with?
That's such a big question. Golden nugget. I think you got to lead this one off here.
Well, my golden nugget is that, in general, for every person walking this earth, you have no idea who you really are. Yeah. That would probably be it. It's the one thing that, right now people, are tired. People feel beaten down. People just, have all kinds of feelings and depression. And if I could, help them understand and see who they really are and how big and powerful they actually are. Again, not saying they're not meant to have some of these life experiences, but I like to build up people. And, I just say you are so much more magnificent, and we are who we have been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the other. Look within and see who you are versus looking outside for a savior. We are so much more than you can imagine. And that's the other thing we like to do, to just build people up so they can see and have experiences to prove that to themselves, that they can control the world around them a little bit more. Everyone is a magnificent being. The lifting is taking and dusting off the dirt and becoming who you actually are, because you are a great being. And, we just want to leave people with that it's the one thing that, you can't take away from me, that I just foundationally know now.
Mm-hmm. And as we say, deny the known, manifest differently, meaning deny the known, meaning the beliefs that you hold, what you feel is truth around you, which it could be distorted based on a belief, based on things you're looking at, seeing, knowing what you feel you understand at this current moment in time. And then manifest differently, meaning of changing your perspective and your perspectives and perceptions, meaning you ground in your own I am presence in the here and now. You bring in better parts of your current avatar, better parts of your oversoul. You ground that information here. It's not there's not necessarily an ascension to go to. It's changing your perspectives and perceptions as you go along. This version you wouldn't be recognized by a version of you from, say, 20 years ago. So you just change as you go along. That's kind of where my golden nugget is at too.
All right, very cool. And thank you both. And to everyone out there, make it a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon. And if you're asleep, feel free to wake up and watch some shows. And with that being said, I will say good night to everyone and make it a wonderful day. And remember, everything is your own perspective, and that the power is within you. And one thing I like to add as well with that is you don't need to give up hope, because you never know what's around the proverbial symbolic corner. And that what you were waiting for to help you could be right around the corner. So never give up hope. Good night, everyone.
All right.